Hello, I'm Dr. Q. At the end of a previous video, an introduction to macroeconomics, we discussed the topic of inflation. This video provides a more detailed explanation. Inflation indicates a general rise in the overall price level and a reduced purchasing power of the same amount of money. Not all prices rise at the same rate, and some may stay constant while others fall. Reduced purchasing power means that each dollar of income will buy fewer items than before. The main index used to measure inflation is the Consumer Price Index, CPI. The Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, CPIU, is the inflation index the mass media reports. This CPI is for all urban consumers and is thought to cover 87% of our population's purchasing experience. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports other important price indexes to different groups, such as CPI for urban wage earners and clerical workers, producer price indexes, etc. In the video GDP Income Approach, a time of 10 minutes, we covered the definition of price index and the market basket. Please refer to the resource for review. Consumer Price Index is measured as the price of the most recent market basket in a particular year, divided by the price estimate of the market basket in 1982 to 1984, multiplied by 100%. To measure inflation, subtract last year's price index from this year's price index and divide it by last year's index. Finally, multiply by 100% to express as a percentage. In this numerical example, CPI data for December 2024 has a price index of 315.6, and December 2023 has a price index of 306.7. You can calculate the inflation rate and find it is 2.9%. The BLS runs to the 10th decimal place. Let's do a practice, pause, and come back. Alright, according to the formula for calculating the rate of inflation, we use the CPI of 2002 minus the CPI of 2001 as numerator, use the CPI of 2001 as the denominator, and multiply by 100%. The detailed steps are shown here. Rule of 70 permits quick calculation of the time it takes the price level to double. Divide 70 by the percentage rate of inflation, and the result is the approximate number of years it takes for the price level to double. For example, the inflation rate is 1.6%, so divide 70 by 1.6, and you get 43.75. Therefore, prices would take about 44 years to double at that inflation rate. If the inflation rate is 7%, then it will take about 10 years for prices to double. Let's practice, pause, and come back. Alright, according to the rule of 70, the price doubles in about 8 years and 3/4. There are two types of inflation, the demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Demand pull inflation is a result of spending increasing faster than production. It is often described as too much spending chasing too few goods. Cost push inflation occurs as price rise because of a rise in per unit production costs. The per unit production costs is a division of total input costs and units of output. In cost push inflation, prices rise, but output falls. Rising costs reduce profits and the amount of output producers are willing to supply at the existing price level. As a result, the economy's supply of goods and services declines, and the price level rises. Supply shocks have been the major source of cost push inflation. These typically occur with dramatic increases in raw materials or energy prices. This is the Consumer Price Index reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. CPIs with different categories of goods or services are calculated. The dashed line represents all items. The solid blue line represents food, and the red line represents energy. The gold line represents all items, excluding food and energy. We can tell that they follow a similar pattern. The energy price is surely the most volatile one, because food like oranges and energy price, like gasoline prices, are subject to wide swings that can be temporary in nature. The BLS also report the core CPI, which is a CPI less food and energy. So the gold line represents core CPI. Policymakers are mainly interested in whether the underlying core CPI is rising and how quickly it is rising. Based on that analysis, they may take measures to try to stop it. About inflation scenarios, I like to discuss two cases. the inflation we experienced after COVID-19 around 2022 and the situation for 2025. First, sometimes it is difficult to distinguish between the causes of inflation. The economy is dynamic, and multiple factors intertwine, evolve, and influence one another. The inflation after the pandemic in 2021 was caused by supply disruption because of COVID-19 or cost push inflation, and the inflation that stayed high in 2022 towards 2023 was caused by fiscal stimulus and low interest rates or demand pull inflation. At first, during the pandemic, the international supply chain was interrupted. Firms that had laid off employees had to find new ones, while some workers left the labor force because of family obligations, illness, or work life balance priorities. Graphically, the left figure shows what happened. The costs of production increase and therefore supply decrease. Shift to the left-hand side. Compared to the previous equilibrium, the crossing point of AS, aggregate supply, AD, aggregate demand, the price level P, and the GDP level Y, the new equilibrium of crossing points of aggregate supply prime, which is the new one, and aggregate demand has output level Y prime lower than the original GDP, and the price level P prime higher than the original price. That's cost push inflation. Price level increase because of aggregate supply decrease. Then this pandemic disruptions eventually subsided. Why didn't inflation then fall? The reason is that by this point, demand was so strong, reflecting the legacy of low interest rates and fiscal largesse. The graph on the right shows what happened then. The increase in demand was shown by aggregate demand moving to the right-hand side. With the supply fixed in the short term, the increase in output was limited. while the price increased dramatically, resulting in demand pull inflation. Moreover, the initial inflation surge had an echo. It lifted workers' expectations of short-term inflation, which then partly found its way into their wages. Then, its cost pushed inflation again because hiring workers to produce the same number of goods or services is more costly. The second situation is the 2025 impact of the tariffs. Tariffs, taxes, and more expensive material resource all do one thing to production: increase the costs. Tariffs increase the production costs of foreign producers. Taxes increase the production costs of domestic producers. Production costs increase, or is more costly to produce, decrease the supply. For example, previously producing one box of strawberries cost me $3 from seeding to the shelf. Now I have to give an extra 30 cents to the government for every box I produce. Will I be happy about this? No. Will I pay for this? Not necessarily. I will not bear the burden of the extra 30 cents, at least not by myself. I will increase the price of strawberries and pass the burden on to final consumers. Will the consumers pay for that? It depends. If the demand is elastic, or the consumers are sensitive to the price, or can be responsive to the price, price increases discourage them from buying dramatically. Then I, the producers, bear more of the burden of tax, and the consumers bear less. But if the demand is inelastic, consumers are not sensitive or cannot be responsive to the price increase, and consumers bear more tax burden than the producers. The same goes for tariffs. When foreign producers are charged tariffs, they will have to pay if they want to export. But they will pass this burden, at least partially, to the buyers. Besides, the supply chain is a complicated multi-stage maze. The tariff on imported products will have a ripple effect on all subsequent production procedures, resulting in cost push inflation in many production sectors. For more articles on inflation, you may refer to the Wall Street Journal, one of the most essential news sources on economics and finances. These two types of inflation differ in sustainability. Demand pull inflation continue if the excess spending continues. For cost push inflation, if there is a recession to decrease aggregate demand, it will end. So for here, if aggregate demand also decrease and move left-hand side, will pull the price downward. Aggregate demand decrease and cross aggregate supply at a lower price level. Again, policymakers focus on the core inflation, excluding the volatile seasonal food and energy goods. Uncertainty is not good for business investment or economic planning. So, anticipated inflation does less harm than the unanticipated inflation of the same scale. Nominal income is the dollars received as wages, rent, interest, or profit. Real income refers to the purchasing power of your income, or how much can be purchased with your income. Real income can decrease even with an increase in nominal income if the inflation rate is higher than the increase in nominal income. Real income can be calculated by dividing nominal income by the price index in hundredth. The percentage change in real income is equal to the difference between the percentage change in nominal income and the percentage change in the price level. All right, let's do practice. Pause and come back. Okay, this is the relationship for percentage change in real income, nominal income, and the price level. We know that nominal income increased by 4.6%, and the price level increased by 1.6%. Then the real income rose by 3%. Another one, pause and come back. We need two steps to solve this question. Firstly, we need to figure out the real income for each year. The initial real income divided by the initial price index and the new real income divided by the new price index. Then we calculate the percentage change using the change in real income as the numerator, the initial real income as denominator, multiply by 100%, and see the real income increase by about 14 to 15%. No economic incident will impact everyone to the same degree. Harm from unanticipated inflation causes real incomes and wealth to be redistributed. When inflation is expected, people can plan ahead for it and mitigate the effect of inflation. Those expecting inflation may be able to adjust their work or spending activities to avoid or lessen the effects. Unanticipated inflation has stronger impacts. Fixed income groups will be hurt because their real income suffers. Their nominal income does not rise with prices. Unanticipated inflation will hurt savers because interest rate returns may not cover the cost of inflation. Their savings will lose purchasing power. Creditors or lenders can be harmed by unanticipated inflation. interest on payments received may be less than the inflation rate, and the loan payments will have less purchasing power for the lenders when the lender does not correctly anticipate and account for inflation. If inflation is anticipated, the effects of inflation may be less severe, since wage and pension contracts may have inflation clauses or cost of living adjustments built in, and interest rates will be high enough to cover the cost of inflation to savers and lenders. Debtors like borrowers can be helped because interest payments may be less than the inflation rate. So borrowers receive dear money and are paying back cheap dollars. Inflation premium is the amount that the interest rate is raised to cover the effects of anticipated inflation. Real interest rate is defined as nominal rate minus the inflation premium. This figure shows the inflation premium and nominal and real interest rates. The inflation premium the expected rate of inflation gets built into the nominal interest rate. Here, the nominal interest rate of 11% comprises the real interest rate of 5% plus inflation premium of 6%. Let's see if you can figure this one out. Pause and come back. Alright, this one provides the real interest rate 5% and the inflation rate 2%. We can determine nominal interest rate by summing the two 7%. Deflation has been as much a problem as inflation. For example, the 1930s depression was a period of declining prices and wages. The effects of deflation are the reverse of those of inflation to different people. In other videos, we also mentioned the deflation of China experienced after COVID-19. Effects of inflation are arbitrary in terms of individuals who will benefit and individuals who will be harmed, regardless of a society's goal. As aforementioned, cost-push inflation, where resource prices rise unexpectedly, could cause both output and employment to decline, resulting in lower real income. Mild inflation, like less than 3%, has uncertain effects. It may be a healthy byproduct of a prosperous economy, or it may have an undesirable impact on real income. The Federal Reserve aimed at 2%. There is a danger of creeping inflation turning into hyperinflation, which can cause speculation, reckless spending, and more inflation. This is the inflation rate across the world provided by IMF. We can see that the world's inflation is way more dramatic than the United States. Most developed countries and regions hover similarly at a relatively low level. Japan's inflation rate is very mild. Alright, that's all for the video. See you in the next one.